Well, all of a sudden we found ourselves wrapped up in a pandemic. So that's where a lot of our minds are right now. We're trying to think about what the implications of that is for ourselves and our families and our communities. And, we're thinking about the future of society and potential changes in society that we might see as this comes and goes. So we're going to be talking about that here. And actually, we're going to be hosting a webinar as well. So I'll put the link to that below, where basically we're just going to, get together and think about what the implications are and the things that we need to thinking about as marketers operating in this uncertain climate. So the first thing I want to talk about, and this is something that we saw immediately when this pandemic really hit us here in the United States, is the need for authenticity. So we are looking for accurate messages and accurate information of what's going on. Of course, we're looking in all directions. We're looking at political leaders, and we're looking at our information that we get online, and we're also looking at our brands and companies to provide authentic information as well. So one of the important communications for anybody that is communicating to an audience in that scenario, and this doesn't just apply to the present times, by the way, this applies generally. Everything I'm talking about generally applies, but it's even more important and even more critical to think about right now. And it just involves being empathetic to the state of the mind of the person who sees what you're trying to communicate. So for example, people might be looking through their social media posts. They're likely to see some scary information, and then they're likely to see an advertisement, and then, maybe some other information that is also alarming. And so you have to think about that. You have to think about the context. And so just coming from that perspective of being aware of where people are in terms of their perception of this. Because if you're going to go out and communicate, it's really important that you align with the severity and the situation of the audience. And that's critical for getting your message across. And this is something I talked about previously with the boomerang effect, which was a case with smoking. And what happened is that if you, for example, say that smoking is bad, but you don't say that it's as bad as people think it is, then they won't trust your message as much as if you accurately depicted how bad it was. And so, coming out and saying that this is going to be an easy situation is probably not going to be enough for a lot of people because they expect you to say that it's going to be more difficult than that. But you also can't, overly catastrophize the situation too. You have to align with the reality. That's the most important thing. And then you can more effectively send your message. And that's one of the things that we saw with the swine flu, which hit the UK. There's a study which I'll link to below. People thought that too much of a fuss was being made about it. If they didn't think that the information was accurate, then they were not likely to take those recommended behaviors into account. So this becomes really important when you're trying to get people to engage in behaviors that are critical around this time, like we've been hearing about so much in society, like washing your hands and covering your mouth and things like that. And I'll go into more about the behavioral science of the effectiveness of the messages that we've been using for these public health sort of behaviors in later videos. So stay tuned. So the first messages that we started to see as this all came about, American Airlines president came out and acknowledged the situation. And there's also a video I stumbled of the Dodgers manager doing this. And what you're seeing is you're seeing the heads of these companies, or the managers, basically kind of the face of these companies, coming out and directly talking to the audience in an authentic way. And that is something that we really need. And so prioritizing video messages over texts, one thing people have commented on and that we're seeing a lot of is these companies who we haven't heard from for a long time, some random hardware store that you gave your email to years ago is sending you a message about their thoughts on the coronavirus, for example. And so it is a difficult time to be communicating these things, but I'm just encouraging video as an effective way because we're designed to use those subtle cues like the tone of people's voice and the way that they talk and the things that they talk about. We get so much more from that when we watch a video than if we just read some email that has been, edited and designed to communicate a message in a particular way. The other notion about being authentic and being accurate in your information is that there's a certain amount of anxiety that's important. And from a behavioral science perspective, in terms of trying to promote these behaviors, the accuracy is important in one sense because there's a right level of anxiety that people need to have to engage in behaviors. But too much anxiety can be counterproductive and can cause people to avoid the messages and disregard the messages. So you have to be at the right level. And it's important to couple those messages with positive, encouraging things that people can do that actually give them a feeling of control over the situation, like things that they can do to protect themselves. And another important point is that you want to be careful about reassuring the public as opposed to informing the public. Often informing is the most effective in these type of serious situations. So reassuring them makes you question, like, why do they have to reassure me? And people can become distrustful. And they will be less likely to align with the message, the sort of behavioral changes that they are supposed to make to try to help society at this time. And I'll put a link to a study that supports this below. So one thing that many brands are doing immediately is that they're focusing less on sales and more on customer care. And that's an opportunity that they have right now, is that you have the outlet to communicate with your customers, and you know that they're struggling with understanding what's happening right now, and you can try to help them through that. So an example would be fitness ads that changed from trying to sell specific fitness pieces like a membership to the gym or fitness equipment to a recommendation for workouts that help people de-stress. And that's something that they'll find value in. And that's something that they'll enjoy engaging with that brand about in these current times. Now, one of the interesting things that we're seeing, again, I mentioned how there's a big focus on authenticity. And this is a big issue for the notion of fake news, which of course is very prominent. And social media platforms like Facebook struggle with the reputation of the information that they have. So it's really important that these platforms can address this. And those platforms that address it in the best way right now are going to be an advantage. Because if, for example, people learn that Twitter provides the best information, or they find a good source of information on Twitter, then they'll start using that platform more and more, and it'll become more habitual, and they might continue using it. And that's one of the things that seems to be happening with Snapchat. There's an Adweek article that came out that said that Snapchat is one of the best social platforms during COVID-19. The article claims that they don't have the same amount of misinformation as the other platforms, and that the users are actually posting about issues like hand sanitization and gloves, and they're getting content from reliable sources like the World Health Organization and NBC News. So that's sort of a surprising example of one platform that emerged as a trustworthy source that people can gravitate to and then potentially stick with as this comes and goes. Facebook and Google are trying to address this. And there's a Drum article that I'll include below titled Facebook and Google Unite to Help NHS Fight Fake Coronavirus News. And basically what happened was there was a fake account on Twitter that posted information that was incorrect about the severity of the amount of cases that were going on. And so Twitter closed down the account and gave these blue verification checks to over 800 National Health Services accounts to make sure that the information that we're getting is from credible sources. And, these other platforms are trying to follow suit in making sure that the information is accurate. And these platforms are devoting important real estate in order to provide links to accurate information. So Twitter has a search result that sends you to the Center for Disease Control. YouTube and Instagram also put information right where people can see it, where they can find accurate information. So this is a really great thing that we're seeing. And we've also seen publishers take down paywalls for coronavirus information. And that was an Adweek article. So generally, we want this information to be communicated freely. And these platforms are making the adjustments that they need to do to try to make sure that that information comes out. Overall, it's best for society, but it's best for them too in general, in that they're giving people access to the information that they need. You're basically giving the customers what they're looking for and what they want. And that's something that we're always incentivized to do and something that we should always be doing and thinking about. So thanks for checking out this video on the benefits of authenticity and accuracy in these difficult times. I know that we are still just trying to understand everything that's happening. And so we're going to keep trying to understand what's happening and talking about it here. So hit the subscribe and the bell to follow along, and hit the like if you like and the share if you share. Let us know in the comments what you think. Let us know what you're concerned about, what you'd like us to talk about, what you'd like us to try to understand, and so on. And like I said at the beginning, we're hosting a webinar on this where we're going to collect all our thoughts together and make recommendations for what marketers need to think about and what they can anticipate in the future as this pandemic comes and goes. Thanks for checking this out.